Joining us now is Ken Blackwell, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. So, Ken, when we look at this idea that people are trying to hold China accountable for these actions, what realistically is there that the United States can do?
Well, I think the president has put us on a real significant path to righting the worldwide bullying that China engages in. Look, the president knew that he had to, right the imbalance in our trade negotiations with China. He has done that. The president also knows that China is the world's leader in the theft of intellectual property. And we're starting to mobilize our domestic forces to block that sort of theft of our intellectual property. We know that this is a mad race to make sure that they dominate 5G. Well, we in fact have the inside track on that, and we're going to protect it. This president is the first president in my lifetime that has taken off the kid gloves and gone straight at China. And lo and behold, who does he have potentially facing him in November? But Beijing Joe.
And, it's interesting, too, because the idea of China's emergence, I mean, it's only taken place maybe within the past 40 years when they kind of moved to a more capitalistic type of economy, opposed to what they were doing before in the early 80s. And ever since then, too, the entire world has approached China as a very hands-off type of approach. In fact, if you ask some people, they're still considered to be a developing country, even though they're the second largest economy in the entire world. And now, as of recently, we have seen a little bit more scrutiny applied to them, not only when it comes to economic things, such as you named, when it comes to 5G networks, trade imbalances, stuff like that, but also human rights violations. We could talk about the Uyghur populations. We could talk about just the rampant racism that takes place in China. And you're the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Council. Can you talk about what you think of China just even getting a spot on that council?
It's embarrassing. Look, I've spent years working with the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and many times countries that should be in the dock were on the jury. And China knows how to manipulate the jury in the United Nations framework. They've leveraged debt that other countries owe them, and they've bought their votes in organizations like the World Health Organization or the United Nations Human Rights Commission. And so what this president is basically doing is saying no longer are we going to turn a blind eye to China's assault, not just economic assault, but as you mentioned, assault on human rights. There is a world clash between two worldviews. We are trying to create an opportunity society where liberty, a culture of liberty is cultivated. They are a very statist government, and in their world, because they are atheists, our basic human rights are not gifts from God; they're grants from government. And these guys will, in fact, use a heavy hand to deny the human rights that are a part of our God-given human dignity.
Yeah, and it is a little ironic to me when we talk about, for example, people saying that it's xenophobic to talk about China's role in this. And I think it's very important to be clear that we're not talking about the Chinese people. The Chinese people are good, hardworking individuals. It's the Chinese Communist Party that is a detriment to those people. Because of their inaction, many Chinese people died, and now, of course, that virus has spread across the world. And it is a little bit ironic to me when we say that it's racist to say so, because there's nobody more racist than the CCP. But before I let you go, too, you mentioned Joe Biden earlier before. 75% of Americans say they want to hold China accountable for this whole pandemic. And now we see the ties between Biden and China. Do you think that'll be a big factor in November?
I think it's going to be a huge factor because one of the things that the president has said is not only America first, but the president understands that there is an existential threat to a world order that embraces freedom. And China is that existential threat. Joe is an apologist for them. The president confronts them.
Yeah, and of course it pairs up with the economic stuff that we were talking about. I mean, people are on board with the president taking on the trade imbalances, not to mention the national security concerns, IP theft. We can just go down the list and it's all right there. So I think you're spot on for saying that, and it'll be up to the American people come November. But Ken, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.